So to get started on this project, the first thing that we did was give yourself an idea of the kind of style that you want to draw off for each of your characters. It can be something that's very realistic, it can be something more cartoonish, it can even be something linear. As long as you are comfortable drawing each of the characters in the same style, that's what we want to go for. For me, I also sketched out the 3 different characters that I want, and in sketching it also gives me an idea of how I want each of the little parts to transition. Now, for my sketches, I didn't do every single frame or every single keyframe. Instead, this gives me an idea that I want to have all of my objects have 2 different tones, have a line going through them or incorporate a line, and along the way, I think each of these are going to melt or merge into one another in a swooping fashion. So each one's going to have 2 different tones, and both will go to opposite sides of the screens. The other thing that I did, just to make it a little bit easier to flesh out the style and design, was I brought my illustrations into Illustrator and I worked out the look and feel of these. You don't have to do this particular part, but it does take away a lot of the guesswork on what I have to do before I jump into Adobe Animate. So this will give me an idea of how I want to set up my colors and what I need to do for each of the layers for the animation. So to get started, let's go into Animate. I'm going to create a full HT document, and I'm going to scale my document down to fit into my window. That looks good from there. Now, if you wanted, you could copy and paste anything you've created from Illustrator into Adobe Animate, and later on that'll actually save me a little bit of time. But I do want to show you what it takes to be able to draw off and create each of the little parts from here. On my bottommost layer, layer 1, we're going to call this my tracing layer. From here, we'll go to File, and I'm going to import to my stage the illustration that I just created for my hand-drawn sketch. So this is what I want to be able to trace off everything for. We'll say Open and place it on my desktop, and I want to be able to create one frame or at least one setup for each one of these little parts. Now everything that animates needs to have its own particular layer. Since this face is the most complex one, this is the one that I'll start off with doing. So on this layer, let's back out. Make sure it's the correct size that you want it to be. So in this case, maybe I'll zoom out and make it a little bit larger. Do make sure to hold down your Shift key as you place it in the middle, maybe a little bit smaller for me. We'll zoom back in. And if you double click on the tracing layer icon, we're going to drop the opacity of it down to about 50%, and we're going to lock this down and make it a guide layer. This way, when I go to trace it and when I go to test my animation, it won't show up and it'll make it nice and easy to be able to draw. Next thing I need to do is to break down all the different parts that need to be drawn off and created. For instance, I've got this nice little curved square and I've got a line going through it. Let's do the line first. Since the line can be drawn using just straight edges, I'm going to use my pen tool. With the pen tool, I'm just going to rough out the size of it. And then we'll set a stroke of blue, and let's test what I've got either. Whoops. Do make sure you got a new layer. So let's go down here, and we'll call this my face line layer. This is a layer that we'll be doing drawing on, and I think that'll be a good starting point for that particular line. So I've set it to be about 20 points wide. The other thing to pay attention to is make sure you're working with object drawing mode turned off. This is going to make it much easier to edit and delete things away if you don't have the objects to be able to deal with as well. So with that turned on, got my style, got my stroke set up good. We'll set it to be an end cap of straight. And all I'm going to do is use my pen tool to trace off this one particular line. With that done, the other thing I wanted to do is to change the settings for my stage color. By default, it's set to white, so I'm going to double click on it. And I wanted more of a darker color that can show up really well with the light colors that I have. Not necessarily 100% black, maybe just a dark navy blue would work good for there. I like the look of that. If you need to, you can turn off visibility for your tracing layer, And when I do that, I can also see I need to change the color of the stroke that I was working with for that line. We're going to set that to be nice and white. So now that I got the line established, let's turn back on my tracing layer. We'll lock down the line, and let's draw off the curved rectangle. To create something like this, of course it's going to be two different sides. I'm going to grab my regular rectangle tool. Again, make sure your drawing mode is turned off. I'll set my fill color for now to be something nice and noticeable. So maybe I'll set one side to be red, and we'll turn the stroke off and set that to be 0. I'm going to rough in the shape of my rectangle, and to round off the edges, we'll grab our black arrow selection tool, carefully click on the edge, and simply drag it down until it matches where it needs to be. If you need to, you can also click on the endpoints and realign those to be exactly where it matches your sketch that you have. So if you've got simple shapes, those are simply drawn off using the pre-made shapes that are there as well. The next thing I need to do is obviously cut this along the line that we've already created. So let's use that one that we've established. Very quickly and easily, I'm going to lock down this one or turn off visibility. Let's select our line. I'll go up to Edit, and we'll copy it. Jump back into our other layer. By the way, this one should be called I'm going to call it my left face layer. I'm going to go up to Edit and paste it right in the same place. So now it's nice and on top of it. And we'll set the stroke size to be very, very thin. The reason I want to do this is because I want this to cut through the red so I can select one side and the other side. And because it's there, it makes it very, very easy to do that. You can see one side is going to be more of a pink, and the other side is going to be more of a blue. So let's set that to be there. So for this left side, we'll set the fill color to be the color I want it to be, and I think that pink will work well, maybe a little bit darker. And the other side, we'll set it to be a light blue to match our theme for here. Turning off our tracing layer, this will give us an idea of what it looks like. I think that'll go well for this. The last thing I need to do, obviously, is to erase away my white line that goes between these two. Carefully select everything. And since we've got the left side of the face established on one layer, let's select the right side. I'm going to cut it away. Let's make a new layer for the right side. We'll paste it right in the same spot too. So now we have a left, a right, and a line. Looking at our tracing layer, I need to have two different eyes and of course a mouth going through this as well. Now for those eyes, they need to be the same color as my background. So what I'm going to do for that is simply draw a circle, grab my oval tool, make a new layer for the right eye, and draw it off. Change the color of that. So in this case we want the stroke to be none, and let's set the fill color to be the same as there. So there's my right eye. We'll scale him down, and let's make a copy for the left. Command C, make a new layer. This will be my left eye. We'll place it onto that particular layer for there. The final thing this is going to need is the smile. For that one's simple enough to be able to draw off a line. If you're not comfortable using the pen tool, you can grab the fluid brush tool. And with the fluid brush tool, this allows you to just freehand draw and fill in what you've got. In our case, I think I'm just going to click and drag and draw off the smile as I've got it here. So any one of these tools can be used for the drawing. When we turn on visibility for all of those, you can see I've got my stacking order off by a little bit. Let's move that line on top of everything. And perfect, I've got my illustration nice and set up. So repeat this process for the other parts of your illustration too. Now in this case, my first frame is going to be for my first object. For my second object, I'm going to give myself some time. So I'm going to move over to 2 seconds on my timeline, and I'm going to simply fill it in with a blank keyframe. So insert a blank keyframe. That'll delete away everything. Let's also insert just a regular keyframe on my tracing layer, and we'll move him down to my second object. In this case, I want it to morph into the heart shape. Now the fun thing about the heart shape is, since I've already got it established in Adobe Illustrator, let's just go ahead and copy and paste it over and work with the bits that are here. If you want to do this, we'll copy this, so Command C from Illustrator. When you jump into Adobe Animate, we'll select one of the layers. In this case, I got the left face layer. We'll lock down everything else just to make sure we don't tear that up. When you paste it in, it's going to give you a couple of options. I like to import it using the Illustrator Files Preferences. We'll say OK to that. And by default, when it brings it in, it's going to bring it in an object mode. That's OK for now. The first thing we need to do, is lock down our tracing layer and select those objects. And let's scale it up to the size we want it to be. Now you can see for this heart, it no longer has the eyes and the mouth, so we don't really have to worry with this. But I do have to worry with the line and making sure it looks correct, and making sure the heart parts are on the same layer as the pink parts is on layer as the pink face, the blue parts is on part of the blue side of the face. So with that, I'm going to select the pink side of the heart. We're going to cut it away. Let's find the appropriate layer for our face. In this case, it'll be the left side of the face. I'm going to choose the left face layer. I'm going to paste it into there. We'll do a paste in place. With it pasted, we need to break it apart from being a solid object. So if I right click on it, we'll tell it to break apart, or Command B, and this will turn it into the color that we want it to be for here. Do the same thing for the blue layer. So with it selected, we'll cut it away. This will be the right side of the face. Edit, paste in place, and then Command B to break it apart. Final thing we need to do is for the line on the face. So with it unselected, I can also see that my line was 21 points. So when I paste this back into place, it also needs to be the same correct size too. So let's change up the stroke size to be 21, the way it should be. We'll cut it away, select the correct layer, and then paste in place from here. And finally Command B to break it apart. So in this case, once it goes from the face to the heart, we need to transition and animate all the different parts from there. I can see we've got a heart on here too, so let's go ahead and get rid of this one because that doesn't need to be part of the overall layer. There it is for there. Whoops. That's the problem. We got it away from that. We'll get rid of this original layer. So when we paste it on, it obviously created its own little layer for that. So those three parts are the same, and you can do, in my case, the same thing for the hand that I have. I'm going to jump ahead and go ahead and do this without explanation, but once you've established all three of your objects, then we can break down the in-between frames to animate it, moving between all three of those. Alright, with all three of those established, the last thing I want to do is to transition from my last object back to my first object, which will be the face. So I need to select all of the frames from the first keyframe. In this case, we don't necessarily need the tracing layer. And with all of those selected, we'll right-click and copy the frames. And we'll go over to, I'm giving myself 2 seconds for everything, the 6th second, and we'll paste the frames right there. So now it'll go from the hand back to the face, and the animation should be able to loop and repeat back to where it should be. The next thing we need to do is to establish a storyboard layer that will allow us to trace off and give us a sense of how we want everything to move between each particular part. In my case, I want the face to break apart and move from one side around, and the other side it'll loop around. And I want the line to also move in a looping fashion and match up to the line on the heart. So if this is the case, I'm going to go to the very topmost layer, make a new layer. This will be my storyboard layer. And just like we've done with the tracing layer, I want to double click on it, and I'm going to turn it into a simple guide layer. We'll say OK. From here, I'll use my pencil tool. We'll set the stroke color to be something that's a little bit different from everything else. So in this case, maybe just a light blue. Well, not even a light blue. Let's go for an orange. And I need to make some decisions. I want this to transition up and around and then back into where the hand would be. So there it is. It's going to go up and down to through there. And the pink part needs to come around and loop in from here. I don't want it to go off the edge, so let's have it go around this way. So now that should coalesce more to there. And I can see my line is going to start or end here. So maybe there's my starting point. Here's my ending point. Oops, I need to put it there. If you need to see both sets of frames, this is where turning on your onion skinning is going to come in handy. Let's pull it out. There now I can see the starting and stopping point. I could have it simply rotate and transition, but I like the, let's make it break apart. Maybe this top part will loop around to here, so I'll let it go off frame. Let's see, we'll go around to there. That looks good. And this part will simply loop around back to here. So as it moves, it'll go from there. Actually, I'm going to back up. Let's go from this point to here, and I think this point should connect in down to there. That'll look a little bit better. So we'll break it up into two different parts. The eyes themselves, I'm going to let them move along with each part. So those will go outward and get smaller. And the mouth, I think, is simply going to go inward to disappear and get rid of that line altogether for that. Now that I've got my storyboard established for that particular part, we'll turn off our onion skinning. And we'll have it map out between both of those two. Let's take this one thing at a time. Going back down to my storyboard layer, I'm going to open up the options, drop the opacity, and now let's lock it down so I don't accidentally work on it. We'll zoom in, and I'll do the eyes and mouth first because those are the easiest and they need to go out of the way. So let's lock down all of those. We'll turn on or unlock this leftmost eye. That looks good. And let's see, so the starting position will be here. As it moves forward, it needs to quickly just get smaller or wink out of existence. So I'm going to go forward 2 frames, and we're going to have it move over. You can see it automatically adds a keyframe for me, and I'm going to slightly manipulate it till it gets lower and lower. So 2 more frames, have it match out, get smaller, 2 more frames, go up, smaller again, 2 more frames, gets really small, in this case it's getting so small I need to zoom in so I can see it. And maybe 2 more frames and it's going to be gone altogether. It's starting to wink out of existence. This would be cool. It'll even rotate as it goes. So you can see there's my transition as it moves out into nothingness. One more. Make it super small. That'll be the last one. Let's test that. So turning off my storyboard layer, turning on looping, and set my loop to go just between those frames. There it goes with that. If your animation looks too choppy, all you have to do is work in between any one of those two frames and give it a little bit more difference between the two. Here's what I mean. So if this is the starting point, we'll turn on onion skinning. I can see it's going to be moving from here to here. So since I'm in between both of those, maybe I'll move it up between both of those, and then I'll select my selection. We'll make it a little bit smaller. Move forward two more, so you can see somewhere in between both of those is where it needs to be. Let's get rid of that past animation. There it is. We'll move it up between these two. Looking good. And then up between those two until it starts to smooth out. If I was to replay it now, you can see how it smoothly transitions from one thing to the other. Let's do the same thing for the other eye. With that done, the final easy thing we're going to work on is the smile. And I think for this one, especially if I unlock the layer, all I'm going to do is nibble away at the ends of it using my eraser tool until it's finally all gone. So again, lock down any layers that you're not working on. Start off with frame number 1, or the first frame for this set. I'll grab my eraser tool. We'll move forward a couple of frames each, and then simply erase it away. Oops. There's that. Turn off my onion skinning so I can see what I'm working through. Move forward. And you can see based on this, they're pretty much going to end up disappearing at the same rate as the eyes. So I think that works well. Now let's focus on animating the line in between. Remember, I want my line to split in half, and if I look at my storyboard, it's going to follow one side around to the other and the top edge around to the other side so that it meets back in the middle again in this particular shape. This means I need to be able to transition from this shape to this shape, and I need to get an idea of the path that it's going and where it should be along the way. To help me out, I'm going to turn off visibility for all of my layers except for that line layer. So we're going to deal just with the line layer that we're working on for now. I'm also make sure let's There it is. Let's unlock that layer and we'll have it selected. To make this easier for me, I need to locate the midway point between the first and the second transition. And that's going to be right at the little first second. So I'm going to insert a keyframe right here at frame number 30. And I'm going to go ahead and draw off my line where I want it to be halfway through their arc. So grabbing my pen tool, set my stroke to be the way the stroke should be for this. I think that looks good there. I want this stroke to be roughly right here for that halfway turn, and the other one needs to be roughly right about here for its halfway point too. Actually, let's go ahead and bring it over just a bit more. Oops. With that done, we can also erase away our original line. And this will give us a starting point to aim for. Now I can go through and split up my line and have it start to move into the halfway point, and then later on we'll actually work backwards and move it from the second point back to the halfway point too. With this done, you can see how I've started to break down each of the individual movements of the line until it finally comes together. And then I further go back and I break down all the in-betweens, making it much more smooth until finally it all comes together the way it should be. If I do see any problems, this is where I can go back and make any corrections or changes before I move forward to the next part. So this is where I'll take a break for this one. Next time we'll talk about how to transition the larger areas of the entire body of the face, moving from one particular part or one color into a shape of another color. This will bring all of these together for our final animation.